Wales has over 600 castles, more than any other country in Europe by land area. Most are rubble now, photogenic stone skeletons on hilltops, visited by tourists who eat sandwiches in what used to be great halls, but some never became ruins. A small number of Welsh castles built before 1500 are still occupied, not as museums, as homes, places where people sleep in medieval bedrooms, locked doors that are 5 centuries old, and wake to landscapes their buildings were designed to dominate or defend. Some are held by the same families that built them, bloodlines stretching back 20 generations. Some were abandoned for centuries, then rescued from collapse by obsessives who couldn't let them die. Some you can rent tonight if you have enough money and a tolerance for stone walls 3 feet thick. These aren't heritage sites that happen to have caretakers. They're addresses, living occupied fortresses in a country where most castles stopped being homes during the Wars of the Roses. This video covers 10 of them, all built before 1500, all still occupied in some form, ranked from remarkable to almost impossible to believe. 1. Powys Castle, Welshpool, Powys, 1 mile from the town centre, perched on a ridge above the Severn Valley, built in the 1200s by the Welsh princes of Powys, Gruffydd ap Gwenwynwyn's lineage. Red sandstone, designed to project power during the fragile period when Welsh princes tried playing both sides, swearing loyalty to the English crown while maintaining independence. When Edward I conquered Wales in 1282, most Welsh lords lost everything. The Powys dynasty survived by bending the knee early, rewarded for loyalty, allowed to keep their fortress when others were dispossessed or killed. The castle passed by marriage to the Herbert family in 1587, English aristocrats who added Elizabethan interiors inside the medieval shell. The Herberts became Earls of Powys. In 1784, they married into the Clive of India line, East India Company wealth that saved the estate when inheritance taxes nearly forced a sale in the early 1900s. The family made a deal with the National Trust in 1952. The trust manages the property. The Earl of Powys maintains private apartments inside. It's the compromise survival model. Give up full ownership to keep your presence. The castle that survived by choosing the winning side every time. Welsh lords who bent to Edward, aristocrats who married colonial fortunes, nobles who negotiated with heritage organizations when the money ran out. 800 years of pragmatic compromise. The question it raises, is this survival or slow surrender? 2. Picton Castle, near Haverfordwest, Pembrokeshire, 4 miles east of the town in wooded grounds. Low-lying position, unusual for a castle. Most choose high ground. This one didn't need it. Built in the late 1200s by Sir John Wogan, an Anglo-Norman knight given Welsh land as payment for military service. Constructed immediately after Edward I's conquest, during the brutal plantation period when English colonizers built power bases in freshly conquered territory. Pembrokeshire was designated an English county. Welsh population pushed out. English settlers brought in. The low position suggests confidence. This wasn't built to defend against Welsh resistance, it was built to dominate a pacified population. The Wogan family held it until the male line failed in 1405, passed through marriage to the WN family, Welsh gentry who'd anglicised, purchased by the Phillips family in 1491. The Phillips family has occupied it for 530 years, 25 generations without interruption. Through the Tudors, the Civil War, the Industrial Revolution, 2 world wars, and the collapse of the British aristocracy as a functioning class, the castle opens its gardens to visitors, offers select tours, but the family still lives there. Private residence first, heritage site second, the colonizers' fortress that went native, built by English conquerors on conquered Welsh land, now occupied by a family that's more Welsh than English after 5 centuries of continuous presence. What does it mean to belong somewhere when your ancestors took it by force? But that was 25 generations ago. 3. Chirk Castle, on the Welsh-English border, 8 miles south of Wrexham, elevated above the border marches, built in 1295 by Roger Mortimer de Chirk, a marcher lord serving Edward I, part of the Iron Ring of occupation castles constructed in the immediate aftermath of conquest. Marcher lords were given extraordinary powers, private armies, their own courts, semi-independent rule over border territories. Chirk's purpose was control, the northern invasion route between England and Wales, massive drum towers visible for miles, built to intimidate. The Mortimer family lost it during the chaos of Edward II's reign, political intrigues in the 1320s. It reverted to the crown, then passed through various loyalists. In 1595, Sir Thomas Middleton purchased it, a Welsh merchant who'd made his fortune in London buying his way into the gentry. The Middleton family has occupied it for 428 years. They heavily remodeled it in the 1700s and 1800s. Georgian and Victorian improvements that softened medieval severity, covered the military brutality with domestic comfort. By 1911, death duties nearly forced a sale. The family saved it by opening to tourists in the 1930s. A National Trust partnership followed in 1981, the same model as Powys. The Middletons retain private apartments. The trust manages the burden. The border fortress, where the violence is buried under Georgian wallpaper, built to project English military power over a conquered population. Now marketed as a heritage attraction with cream teas in the courtyard, the Victorians papered over what the Normans built for war. Historical amnesia, or just evolution. 4. Carew Castle, Carew, Pembrokeshire. 4 miles east of Pembroke, positioned above a tidal mill pond. The site was fortified in the 1100s by Gerald of Windsor, Norman invader, rebuilt in the 1270s by Sir Nicholas de Carew just before Edward I's conquest. Pembrokeshire was the Norman foothold in Wales. Colonised 200 years before the rest of Wales fell, the Carews were professional military aristocrats, career castle holders. The family held it through the 1300s and 1400s, passed by marriage to Rhys ap Thomas in the 1480s, the Welsh lord who backed Henry Tudor at Bosworth. Rhys transformed it, fortress to palace, added grand apartments, hosted lavish tournaments. His grandson was executed for treason in 1531. The castle was confiscated, granted to Sir John Perrot, rumoured illegitimate son of Henry VIII. Perrot added an Elizabethan mansion section. By 1686, the family had abandoned it, moved to more comfortable houses, left the castle to decay. It became a romantic ruin through the 1700s and 1800s. Picturesque, melancholy, empty. In 2012, Carew family descendants purchased it after 326 years. Sections have been restored, used for events, limited occupation by descendant family members. Mostly it operates as a preserved ruin with interpretation, managed by Pembrokeshire Coast National Park. This isn't continuous occupation, it's reoccupation. The castle that was abandoned became a fashionable ruin, then was reclaimed by the original family after 3 centuries. Is this authentic continuity or historical performance? 5. Tree Tower Court, near Crickhowell, Powys, 3 miles northwest of the town, in the Usk Valley beneath the Brecon Beacons foothills. The original castle was built by the Picard family, Norman invaders, in the 1100s. By the 1400s, it was considered old-fashioned and uncomfortable. The Vaughan family built Tree Tower Court beside it in the 1450s and 1470s, a fortified manor house, built during the brief peace after Owain Glyndwr's rebellion was crushed. It represents the transition from military fortress to domestic residence, with defensive features just in case. The Vaughans occupied it continuously from the 1450s to the early 1900s, 450 years, one of the longest continuous family occupations in Wales. The family declined economically through the 1800s and 1900s, sold in 1929 to a family who couldn't maintain it. It became derelict through the mid-20th century. KDW, the Welsh Heritage Agency, purchased and restored it in the 1960s through 1980s, returned to its 1400s appearance. No one lives there now, but sections are available as heritage holiday accommodation. You can rent medieval rooms. Sleep in a nobleman's chamber from 1450, with electric heating hidden in the medieval fireplace. The castle that became a time capsule rental, empty but lived in by temporary paying guests. People playing at medieval life for £200 a night. Is this the future of historic buildings? Heritage Airbnbs, where continuity is measured in booking cycles instead of generations? 6. Gwydir Castle, Llanrwst, Conwy Valley, 1 mile from the town, in wooded valley below Snowdonia Mountains. Built in the 1470s and 1490s by Maredudd RP Iwan ap Robert, Welsh nobleman claiming descent from Welsh princes. Constructed during the Tudor period when Welsh gentry were gaining favour. Henry VII was Welsh, not purely defensive, built as fortified manor house during a relatively peaceful period, mix of defensive features and domestic comfort from the start. The Wynne family occupied it from the 1490s to 1678, nearly 200 years. Sir John Wynne expanded it significantly in the early 1600s, added Tudor wings, became one of the grandest houses in North Wales. The family died out in 1678, passed through various owners until the Willoughby family acquired it in 1828. Catastrophic abandonment followed. The family decamped in the 1920s through 1940s, left the castle derelict. Contents were sold off. The entire dining room was purchased by William Randolph Hearst. It's now in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. In 1994, Judy Corbett and Peter Welford purchased it. Not aristocrats, a middle-class couple who spent 20 years restoring it themselves. Peter died in 2017. Judy maintains occupation alone now, operates it as private home with bed and breakfast and event venue to fund upkeep. One of the most complete restorations from total ruin in Welsh castle history. The castle restored by sheer obsession, not family legacy, not National Trust funding, just two people who saw a gutted ruin and spent their lives putting it back together. What drives someone to take on a 500-year-old building falling into the ground? 7. Penhow Castle, near Newport, Monmouthshire, 8 miles east of the city, above the coastal plain with views to the Severn Estuary. Built in 1129, possibly earlier, one of the oldest continuously occupied castles in Wales, constructed by Roger de St Maur, Norman family that became Seymour, the line that eventually produced Jane Seymour, Henry VIII's third wife, the one who gave him his son, built during the initial Norman conquest of Gwent, a manor house with defensive tower, never a major military fortress, small scale, built to hold land, not armies. The St Maur family held it until the 1400s, passed through several Welsh and English families through the 1600s. The Lewis family owned it from 1674 into the 1800s. Multiple owners followed as it declined. By the 1970s, it was near ruin. In 1973, Stephen Weeks purchased it. 26 years old, a historian, paid £20,000. He spent 40 years restoring it, maintained it as home and heritage site, sold in 2013 to a private owner, now operated as wedding and event venue, some holiday accommodation available, the castle that gave birth to a queen, then spent 5 centuries sliding into obscurity. The Norman family who built it ended up on the throne of England, but the castle itself became a Welsh backwater, nearly forgotten, almost lost, until one person decided 850 years of history was worth saving. Rescued by obsession, again. 8. Fonmon Castle, Vale of Glamorgan, 5 miles from Barry, overlooking the Bristol Channel coastal plain. Built in the 1200s by the St John family, Anglo-Norman, during the colonization of Glamorgan, possibly on a site with Roman or Dark Age fortifications. Glamorgan was Englished early. Norman conquest of this area predates Edward I by 200 years. The castle was built to dominate rich agricultural land between Cardiff and the sea. Less military fortress, more fortified lordship centre. It passed to the Bourchier family in 1555 by marriage, 468 years ago. The Bourchier descendants have occupied it without interruption since. Currently, Sir Brooke Boothby, 16 generations in the same building, never sold, never abandoned, never besieged. The family remodeled extensively in the 1700s, Georgian style over the medieval core, survived the Civil War unscathed, navigated politics carefully, no dramatic moments, no near-loss crises, just quiet, relentless continuity. still a private residence, operated as event venue now. Weddings, corporate functions, limited public access by arrangement, working estate with gardens and grounds, the castle where nothing happened, and that's what makes it remarkable. In a country soaked in conquest and rebellion, one family kept their head down for nearly 5 centuries. No stories, no legends, just presence, survival through discretion. 9. Castelcoch, Tongwyn lies 5 miles north of Cardiff. Perched on a hillside above the River Taff Gorge, visible for miles. The original castle was built in the 1260s and 1280s by Gilbert de Clare, Norman Lord of Glamorgan, part of the network of fortresses controlling the Welsh valleys during conquest. Small but strategically positioned above a key valley route. Destroyed during a Welsh uprising, probably Glyndwr's rebellion in the 1400s. It lay in ruins for 400 years. Then came the resurrection. The 3rd Marquess of Bute purchased the ruins in 1875. The richest man in Britain, Cardiff Docks fortune, coal wealth, essentially unlimited money. He hired architect William Burgess. What they built between 1875 and 1891 wasn't restoration, it was reimagining. A Victorian fever dream of what a medieval castle should look like. More perfect than any actual medieval building. Conical towers, elaborate interiors, hand-painted ceilings depicting stars and birds and biblical scenes, furniture designed as sculpture, Disney before Disney existed, but built on authentic medieval foundations, using authentic medieval techniques, stone by stone, with obsessive historical research guiding fantasy. The Bute family rarely used it, too theatrical for actual living, given to state care in 1950. KDW manages it now as museum and event space, no permanent residence, but you can rent it. Exclusive overnight bookings, extremely rare, premium pricing, £10,000 and up per night. You can sleep in the fairy tale, the castle that's a Victorian fantasy made real. Medieval ruins rebuilt as what a 19th century billionaire imagined the Middle Ages should have been. So is it real or fake? It's built on genuine foundations, with period-accurate methods, but designed according to romantic ideals, not historical reality. Does it matter when it's this spectacular? Can you live in a fantasy if someone spent a fortune making the fantasy solid? 10. Dyneffor Castle and Newton House, near Llandilo, Carmarthenshire, on the edge of town, dramatically positioned on a cliff above the River Tiwi. 2 structures, 1 site, 8 centuries of occupation. The medieval castle was built in the 1100s and 1200s by Lord Rhys ap Gruffydd, the most powerful Welsh prince of his era. Capital of the Kingdom of the Hobart, one of the few castles built by Welsh princes, not English conquerors. Strategic masterpiece. Cliff edge position made it nearly impregnable. Center of Welsh resistance and culture during occupation. It was fought over repeatedly during the Welsh-English Wars, ultimately taken by English forces in 1287, but by the 1500s, control had returned to the Rice family, descendants of the Rhys line, Welsh origin nobility who'd survived by Anglicizing. They built Newton House in the 1660s in the castle's shadow, a comfortable mansion while keeping the symbolic fortress. Victorian rebuild in 1856 turned it neo-Gothic. The Rice family maintained the estate continuously for over 400 years, through conquest's aftermath, through industrialization, through 2 world wars. Post-war taxation brought the crisis. Inheritance taxes the family couldn't sustain. National Trust partnership in 1974. The family remained in residence until the 1990s. Then they left. No permanent family occupation since. Newton House operates as museum and holiday accommodation now. National Trust lets. The medieval Dyneffor ruins are preserved but unoccupied. The only castle on this list built by the Welsh, not to the Welsh. Lord Rhys's fortress represented genuine Welsh sovereignty before conquest. His descendants held the land, in various forms, for potentially 800 years, but they couldn't hold it through the 21st century. The family that survived Edward I, Glyndwr, the Tudors, the Civil War, and 2 world wars was defeated by inheritance tax. Is this the inevitable fate of all these places? These buildings survived because someone in every generation chose burden over ease. 500-year mortgages paid in heating bills and sanity, stone walls that leak, roofs that cost a teacher's annual salary to repair, rooms you can't afford to heat in winter, the weight of knowing that if you fail, 8 centuries end with you. Some families held on through war, plague, political revolution, and economic collapse, then couldn't survive modern taxation. Others sold to obsessives who spent decades restoring what aristocrats abandoned. A few made compromises with heritage organizations, trading full ownership for continued presence. The next 50 years will decide whether this continues or ends, whether these become luxury hotels where anyone with money can sleep in a medieval fantasy for a night, whether they remain private, living ghosts of a Wales that refuses to die, whether the last families finally exhaust themselves and walk away. What's certain is this: every one of these castles exists because someone looked at an impossible burden and said yes anyway. Not once, every generation. That's what occupation means.